The midnight call. Imagine waking up at 3 in the morning to the sound of your life collapsing. Not a metaphor. A literal, physical collapse. The date is January 10, 2013. The place is a quiet residential street in Omaha, Nebraska. A house is engulfed in a pillar of orange fire. The heat is so intense it's melting the siding off the neighboring garage. A woman named Liz Gollier is standing on the sidewalk, clutching her children, watching every single thing she owns turn into ash. Her family pets are still inside. She's screaming. She's pointing at the shadows, telling the first responders that she did it. That the crazy ex finally followed through on her threats. For the man standing next to her, a mechanic named Dave Kroupa, this isn't just a house fire. It's a haunting. For months, he's been receiving thousands of messages from a woman who refuses to show her face but knows his every move. A woman who vanished into thin air but still manages to pull the strings of his reality. But here is the thing that will keep you up tonight. Here is the part that doesn't make sense. By the time that house burned to the ground, the woman they were accusing, Cari Farver, hadn't been seen by a living soul in over 2 months. No bank records. No sightings. No heartbeat. Just a digital ghost with a grudge. Stick around, because what starts as a messy breakup in the Midwest turns into a digital war of attrition that lasted 4 years. It is a story of a woman who was murdered, yet continued to send emails for over 1,000 days. And the person who was actually typing those messages? Well, they're closer than you think. Welcome to Crime Cortex. Before we get into the bone-deep cold reality of this mystery, I want to ask, where are you watching from? Drop your city and the local time in the comments right now. It's always fascinating to see where the Cortex community is tuning in from. If you're ready for a story that defies every logic of the human heart, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You're going to want to see how this one ends. The setup, a fresh start in Omaha. To understand the nightmare, you have to understand Dave Kroupa. Dave was your typical blue-collar American dad. In 2012, he just moved to Omaha to be closer to his kids after things didn't work out with his long-term partner. He was a manager at an auto shop. He was a car guy. Practical. Straightforward. Not the kind of man who believed in ghosts or elaborate conspiracies. Dave wasn't looking for a wife. He was looking for companionship. He hopped on a dating site called Plenty of Fish, which, back in 2012, was the Wild West of digital dating. That's where he met Liz Gollier. Liz was a single mom. She seemed grounded. She liked cars. They hit it off, but Dave was very clear, I'm not looking for anything serious. Liz agreed. It was a casual, no-strings arrangement. For a few months, it stayed that way. Then, on a random Tuesday at the auto shop, a new customer walked in. Her name was Cari Farver. The spark and the shadow. Cari Farver was different. She was a mother, a brilliant computer programmer, and she had a laugh that filled the room. When she brought her car in for service, the chemistry between her and Dave was instantaneous. It wasn't just a fling, there was a genuine connection there. Dave started seeing Cari. He didn't hide it from Liz, because, remember, they were casual. But then came the intersection. The moment where the timeline splits. One evening, Cari was staying over at Dave's apartment. It was a small place, the kind of bachelor pad you'd expect for a guy just starting over. There was a knock at the door. It was Liz. She claimed she was there to pick up some of her things. It was an awkward, 10-second encounter in a cramped hallway. 2 women, 1 man. No words were exchanged between the women. Just a look. A brief, passing glance. Liz took her stuff and left. Cari stayed the night. On November 13, 2012, Cari kissed Dave goodbye. She had a big project at work, a high-stakes coding job that required her full attention. She walked out of his door, got into her car, and drove away. She never made it to work. She never went home to her son. She simply ceased to exist in the physical world. The breakup from nowhere. Dave expected a text from Cari later that day. Maybe a, "Hey, I made it to work," or a, "Thanks for last night." Instead, his phone buzzed with something he never saw coming. The message read, "I hate you. I'm moving. I found someone else. Don't ever contact me again." Dave was floored. 1 minute they were planning their next date, and the next, he was being blocked and insulted. He tried to call. No answer. He sent a text. No reply. It was a ghosting before that term was even common. But then, the messages kept coming. And they weren't just "stay away" texts. They were venomous. They were personal. They mentioned things Cari shouldn't have known about Dave's private life. Within 48 hours, the digital siege began. The siege of Dave Kroupa. Imagine your phone buzzing every 30 seconds. All day. All night. One message says, "I see you sitting on your couch." Another says, "I hope you like the scratches I put on your car." Dave would run outside, and sure enough, his car was keyed from bumper to bumper. His tires were slashed. He started getting emails, dozens, then hundreds. Then thousands. Cari's mother, Nancy, was also getting messages. Cari told her she'd moved to Kansas for a new job. She told her she was tired of her old life and wanted to be left alone. Nancy knew her daughter. She knew Cari would never leave her son behind. She went to the police, but what could they do? Cari was an adult. She was sending messages saying she was fine. In the eyes of the law, she had simply checked out of her life. But Dave knew something was wrong. The messages were too frequent. No human being with a full-time job could type this much. It was as if Cari Farver had become a full-time professional stalker. And she wasn't just targeting Dave. She started targeting the other woman in his life. She started targeting Liz Gollier. The bonding of the victims. Liz began calling Dave in tears. She was receiving the same threats. Cari told Liz she was going to burn her world down. Cari told Liz that Dave belonged to her. In a twisted way, this shared trauma brought Dave and Liz back together. They were the only two people who understood what it was like to be hunted by this invisible woman. Dave felt a massive amount of guilt. He felt like he had brought this psycho into Liz's life. He felt responsible for the slashed tires and the broken windows at Liz's house. For the next 2 years, this was Dave's life. A digital prison. He moved apartments. He changed his number. It didn't matter. Within hours, Cari would find him. "I see your new curtains," the text would read. The level of surveillance was impossible. It was as if she was living in the walls. Think about that for a second. 2 years of your life. 12,000 emails. 50,000 texts. You can't sleep. You can't date anyone else because they'll get threatened too. You are being dismantled by a person who refuses to show their face. What's the weather like today where you are? Here, it feels like the kind of gray, heavy day where you just want to lock the doors. Which is exactly what Dave Kroupa did every single night. We are about to head into the middle of this storm where things go from harassment to active violence. If you haven't yet, join the Cortex. Hit that like button. It helps the algorithm show this story to more people who need to know the truth. The escalation. By 2014, the situation reached a breaking point. The messages became more violent. Cari wasn't just watching anymore, she was promising blood. Dave was a shell of a man. He'd lost weight. He was constantly looking over his shoulder. He started wondering if he was losing his mind. How was she doing this? How was she everywhere at once? And then came the fire. The fire we talked about at the beginning. Liz Golyer's house, burned to the ground. When the investigators looked at the charred remains of Liz's home, they found the signatures of an arsonist. It was intentional. And the primary suspect was obvious, the woman who had been sending threats for years. The woman who had promised to burn it all down. Cari Farver. The police in Omaha officially labeled Cari a dangerous fugitive. They put out warrants. They searched for her in every shelter, every low-rent motel, every neighboring state. But they found nothing. No one had seen Cari Farver's face since November 13, 2012. It was as if she had become a digital demon, a creature made of code and malice that only existed to ruin Dave Kroupa's life. But as the smoke cleared from Liz's house, 2 detectives in a neighboring county were about to pick up a file that had been gathering dust. They were about to look at the data, not the drama, and they were about to find a glitch in the system that would change everything. The fresh eyes of Pottawatomie County. By early 2015, the file on Cari Farver was thick enough to be a doorstop. But it was a mess. It was filled with thousands of screenshots of hateful texts, reports of slashed tires, and the charred remains of Liz Golyer's house. To the local police, it was a simple, albeit frustrating, case of a woman who had snapped and was living off the grid, dedicated to a life of digital terrorism. But then, the case landed on the desks of 2 men who didn't care about the drama. They cared about the data. Enter Detective Ryan Avis and Sergeant Jim Doty. They worked for the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office, just across the river from Omaha. They started looking at the ghost of Cari Farver with a cold, analytical lens. And the first thing they noticed was the most glaring hole in the entire story. In nearly 3 years, not a single person had seen Cari Farver. Think about that. In the modern United States, it is almost impossible to exist for 3 years without leaving a physical footprint. You need a doctor. You need a grocery store. You need a pharmacy. You need to withdraw cash. But Cari's bank accounts? Untouched since November 13, 2012. Her social security number? No pings. Her son's school records? She hadn't checked them once. The detectives looked at each other and realized the terrifying possibility that everyone else had missed. They weren't looking for a stalker. They were looking for a body. The digital breadcrumbs. Avis and Doty decided to stop chasing Cari and start chasing the signal. They went back to Dave Kroupa and asked for his phone. They asked Liz Golyer for hers, too. Now, Dave was an open book. He was exhausted. He wanted this nightmare to end. He handed over everything. Liz, on the other hand, played the part of the grieving victim perfectly. She'd lost her house to the Cari fire. She'd lost her pets. She was terrified. She gave the detectives access to her devices, likely believing she was too smart to be caught. Pattern interrupt, a slow, deliberate zoom on a computer monitor showing lines of code. The detectives brought in a digital forensics expert. They started looking at the IP addresses, the digital home address of every email sent by Cari. What they found was a labyrinth. The emails were being routed through spoofing servers that made it look like they were coming from all over the country. 1 minute Cari was in Kansas. The next, she was in Canada. It was a sophisticated smokescreen. But then, they found the glitch. They noticed that whenever an email was sent from Cari to Dave, the IP address would occasionally ping back to a very specific location. A public Wi-Fi signal at a library. A coffee shop. And most tellingly, the Wi-Fi at the auto shop where Dave worked. But wait. If Cari was hiding in Kansas, why was she using the Wi-Fi at Dave's job in Nebraska? The detectives started checking the logs. They looked at who was in those locations when the messages were sent. And one name kept appearing in the vicinity. Liz Golyer. The mirror of the soul. The investigators decided to mirror Liz's phone. This is a forensic process where you create an exact digital clone of everything on a device, including the things the user thinks they've deleted. When they cracked open Liz's digital life, the insane twist began to bleed into reality. They found an app on Liz's phone designed to schedule text messages. It allowed a user to write 100 messages at once and set them to go off at specific times throughout the day and night. This explained how Cari could send texts at 3 in the morning while Liz was supposedly asleep next to Dave. They found over 20 secret email accounts. All of them had variations of Cari Farver's name. They found a photo in a hidden folder. It was a photo of a car. A Ford Explorer. It was parked in an apartment complex that Liz had no reason to visit. The detectives ran the plates. It was Cari Farver's car. The car that had been missing for years was sitting in a parking lot less than a mile from where Liz lived. When they processed that car, they found a single fingerprint on the inside of the door. It didn't belong to Cari. It belonged to Liz Golyer. This is the moment where the victim starts to look like a predator. What do you think was going through Liz's mind during those 4 years? Do you think she actually believed she would get away with it? Let me know your theories in the comments. And if you're enjoying the deep dive, make sure you've liked the video, it helps us keep the Cortex running. The trophy room. The detectives knew they had a stalker. They knew Liz Golyer was impersonating Cari Farver. But they still didn't have a murder. In the United States, prosecuting a nobody murder is incredibly difficult. You need more than just weird emails. You need a smoking gun. So, they kept digging into the deleted files on Liz's SD card. They found a photo that had been scrubbed, but the thumbnails, the tiny preview images, were still tucked away in the phone's cache. The first photo was of a storage unit. The second photo was of the inside of that unit. It was filled with boxes. The third photo was the one that stopped the detectives' hearts. It was a picture of a human foot. A woman's foot. And on that foot was a very specific, very distinct tattoo. The detectives called Cari's mother, Nancy. They didn't show her the photo. They just asked, "Nancy, did Cari have any tattoos on her feet?" Nancy described it perfectly. A small, stylized flower on the top of her foot. The photo on Liz Golyer's phone was a trophy. It was a picture of Cari Farver's body, taken shortly after she had been killed. The psychology of the puppet master. What makes this case one of the most insane stories in American crime history isn't just the murder. It's the commitment. For nearly 4 years, Liz Golyer lived a double life that would break a normal person's psyche. She would spend her days comforting Dave, helping him deal with the trauma of being stalked by Cari. Then, she would go into the bathroom, take out her secret phone, and send Dave a message from Cari, telling him he was a dead man. She burned down her own house. She killed her own dogs. She destroyed every physical memory of her children's childhoods, just to prove a point. Just to make sure Dave Kroupa never looked at anyone else. She wanted Dave to believe that he was the reason for all this chaos. She wanted him to feel so guilty that he would never leave her side. She created a common enemy so that she could be the only one he could trust. What's the weather like where you are right now? Because reading the transcripts of these messages feels like a cold front moving through your soul. It's a level of manipulation that most people can't even fathom. The trap is set. The detectives had the photo. They had the IP addresses. They had the fingerprint in the car. But they wanted a confession. They wanted to know where the rest of Cari was. They decided to play Liz's own game against her. They contacted her and told her that new evidence suggested Cari Farver was actually the one who had been murdered. They pretended to be on Liz's side. They told her, "We think Cari is dead, and we think whoever killed her is trying to frame you, Liz." Liz, ever the narcissist, couldn't help herself. She wanted to help the investigation. She started finding new emails from Cari that supposedly confessed to more crimes. She was walking right into a cage of her own making. But as the detectives moved in for the final interrogation, they realized that Liz had one more card to play. A card that involved Dave Kroupa's ex-wife, Amy. Liz wasn't finished with her masterpiece yet. She was going to try to pin the whole thing on someone else, even if it meant more blood had to be spilled. The frame-up, a mother under fire. By the middle of 2015, Liz Gollier realized the walls were closing in. The detectives were asking too many questions about IP addresses. They were looking too closely at her phone records. Most people would have panicked and fled. But Liz Gollier wasn't most people. She was a narcissist who believed she was the smartest person in any room, including an interrogation room. She decided that if Cari was dead, then someone else had to have killed her. And who better to blame than the woman who stood in the way of her perfect life with Dave Kroupa? Dave's ex-wife, Amy Flora. Liz started a new digital campaign. She created a series of emails from an account she claimed belonged to Amy. In these messages, Amy confessed to murdering Cari Farver in a fit of jealousy. The emails were chillingly detailed. They described how Cari had been stabbed in her own car and how her body had been disposed of in a remote area of Nebraska. Liz even went as far as to shoot herself in the leg. Yes, you heard that right. Liz Gollier called the police, claiming that Amy Flora had jumped out of the bushes and shot her while she was walking in a park. She showed the officers the wound. She showed them the threatening texts from Amy. She was prepared to send an innocent mother of two to prison for life just to keep her own secrets buried. The forensic nightmare. But Liz made one fatal mistake. She assumed the detectives were still looking at the surface of the water. Ryan Avis and Jim Doty didn't believe that Amy's story for a second. Why? Because they had already mirrored Liz's phone. They watched in real time as those confession emails were typed from Liz's own IP address. They watched as she searched for how to fake a gunshot wound and how to frame someone for murder on her browser history. They weren't just watching a killer, they were watching a director try to rewrite the final act of her own movie. The detectives went to Amy Flora's house. They didn't go there to arrest her. They went there to protect her. They told her, Liz Gollier is trying to pin a murder on you. We need your help to stop her. Think about the sheer cold-blooded nature of that. To shoot yourself, to physically mutilate your own body, just to ensure another woman loses her children and her freedom. That is the level of insane we are talking about in this case. What time is it where you're watching? Is it late enough for your mind to start playing tricks on you? Drop the time in the comments. The arrest of Shauna Liz Gollier. On December 22, 2016, more than 4 years after Cari Farver vanished, the charade finally ended. Shauna Liz Gollier was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. When the news broke in Omaha, the community was stunned. For 4 years, everyone, including the media, had portrayed Cari Farver as a crazy stalker. Her name had been dragged through the mud. Her mother, Nancy, had lived in a state of perpetual mourning, being harassed by the woman who had killed her daughter. Dave Kroupa was perhaps the most devastated of all. He realized that for 48 months, he had been sleeping in the same bed as the woman who had murdered the woman he loved. He had shared his fears with his killer. He had let her comfort him while she was the one pulling the trigger on his sanity. The trial, a case without a body. The trial of Liz Gollier was a landmark event in the American legal system. Because Cari's body had never been found, the prosecution had to rely entirely on digital forensics. This was a no-body case built on bits and bytes. The prosecutor, James Masteler, laid out the evidence with surgical precision. 1. The thousands of emails sent from Liz's IP addresses. 2. The trophy photo of Cari's tattooed foot found on Liz's SD card. 3. The fingerprint in Cari's abandoned car. 4. The fake gunshot wound. But the most damning piece of evidence was the identity theft of a dead woman. The prosecution showed how Liz had learned Cari's voice. She had studied Cari's old Facebook posts to learn her slang, her misspellings, and her speech patterns so she could impersonate her perfectly. Liz Golyer sat in that courtroom with a blank expression. She didn't look like a monster. She looked like a regular, middle-aged woman from the Midwest. And that was the most terrifying part. If you're finding this story as bone-deep cold as I am, make sure you share this video. The more people who understand the reality of digital stalking, the better. Let's get this story to 100,000 views. The verdict. In May of 2017, the judge delivered the verdict. Guilty. Shauna Liz Golyer was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She was also given an additional 18 to 20 years for the arson of her own home. As she was led away in handcuffs, she didn't apologize. She didn't reveal where Cari's remains were. She remained the hero of her own twisted story until the very end. The ghost is finally at rest. Cari Farver's mother, Nancy, finally got the one thing she had been praying for, the truth. Her daughter wasn't a runaway. She wasn't a stalker. She was a victim of a level of jealousy that is rarely seen outside of a horror movie. Dave Kroupa moved away from Omaha. He tried to rebuild his life, but the scars of those 4 years remain. He still checks his phone with a sense of dread. He still looks over his shoulder in parking lots. You don't just get over being the centerpiece of a 4-year psychological war. Cari Farver was a brilliant programmer, a devoted mother, and a woman who had her whole life ahead of her. She was killed because she shared a 10-second glance with the wrong person. The final word. This case reminds us that in the digital age, a person can be alive long after their heart stops beating. Your phone, your email, your social media, they are extensions of your identity. And in the hands of a predator like Liz Golyer, those extensions can be turned into weapons. The insane twist in this story isn't just that Liz was the killer. It's that she had the endurance to lie for 1,500 days. She never slipped up. She never felt guilty. She simply existed in a world where she was the only person who mattered. What's the weather like today where you are? It's insert weather here, and honestly, it feels appropriate for a story this dark. Before you go, I want to hear from you. Do you think the police should have caught Liz sooner? Or was her digital smokescreen simply too advanced for 2012? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one of them. This is what we call the long game. Liz Golyer didn't just want to kill Cari, she wanted to consume Dave's entire reality. She wanted to be his only source of comfort. In the United States, we see a lot of crimes of passion, quick, violent bursts of anger. But this? This was a marathon of malice. Every time Dave tried to move on, Liz would detect it. If Dave looked at another woman at a bar, Cari would text him within minutes describing exactly what that woman was wearing. Dave began to believe that Cari Farver had developed supernatural powers. He didn't realize that Liz was simply sitting 3 stools away, or had planted a bug in his car, or was tracking his GPS through a shared family app he didn't know was active. The tech, how she did it. Let's talk about the digital smoke. Liz wasn't a master hacker, but she was patient. She used what we call email spoofing. She would use services that allowed her to send an email that looked like it came from a .gov or a .com address. She created a web of over 40 different personas. Some were friends of Cari who would message Dave saying they saw Cari in a park in Omaha. Others were private investigators who claimed they were looking for Cari and needed Dave's address. It was a total immersion. Dave was living in a Truman Show directed by a murderer. Where are you watching from? If you're in a big city like New York or Los Angeles, you're used to being watched by cameras. But in Omaha, in 2012, you expected a certain level of privacy. Liz Golyer shattered that. Drop your location and the local weather in the comments. Is it as heavy as this story? The testimony of the heartbroken. When we get to the trial in 2017, the most powerful moments weren't the data points. They were the testimonies. Nancy Farver, Cari's mother, took the stand. She talked about the Mother's Day messages she received from Cari. Imagine the cruelty. Liz Gollier sat in her own home, knowing she had killed Nancy's daughter, and typed, "Happy Mother's Day, Mom. I'm doing great in Kansas. Don't try to find me." The prosecution played these messages for the jury. They played the audio of Dave's frantic calls to 911 after Liz's house burned down. They showed the jury the trophy photo of the foot. But the defense had a strategy. They argued that because there was no body, there was no murder. They claimed Cari Farver was still out there, hiding, laughing at all of them. They tried to paint Dave as a man who was so unstable that he drove Cari away. It didn't work. The digital evidence was a mountain that couldn't be climbed. The detectives showed that the Cari messages stopped the very second Liz Gollier was taken into custody. The ghost didn't go into hiding, she went to jail. The legacy of the insane twist. Why does this story resonate so much in the United States today? Because we all live on our phones. We all trust that the person on the other end of the blue bubble is who they say they are. Cari Farver's case changed how the American legal system views digital evidence. It proved that you don't need a body to prove a murder if you can prove that digital soul has been hijacked. This is the final push. We are at the end of the road for Liz Gollier. If this story made you double-check your privacy settings, hit that subscribe button. We have more cases like this coming every week. 100,000 subscribers is the goal, help us get there. What time is it there now? Did you make it through the whole story? If you did, type "I saw the twist" in the comments so I know who the real true crime fans are. Stay safe. Stay vigilant. And remember, the person you're texting might not be the person you think they are. This is Crime Cortex. We'll see you in the next one.